Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome to Adventures in History. Today's topic is Comedic Pedro, 1960. Now, I just wanted to mention the last Comedic Pedro, Part 4. The cover was from a photograph of W.C. Fields, a great comedian from many years ago, the 1920s. And actually, that photograph was made into I had a poster of that as a boy in my room. Pretty cool, and actually in the cover you don't see he had a top hat going up, real high top hat. He was playing poker, and I think it was a movie scene. He's holding his cards up like this, and it had I think he had white gloves on, and he's looking at a guy who's probably saying like, "Hey, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna bet or whatever?" So W.C. Fields. Now today's cover is going to be Charlie Chaplin, another tremendous comedian from many years ago. In fact, one of the first movie stars when movies became popular and, or actually started the early days, back to the silent era of movies. Now you might be saying to yourself, hey, wait a minute, what's happened to Comedic Pedro Part 5? Well, actually, I decided to make a change in the format. Now, one of the things I believe in is being orderly, organization, order. And I realized as we were doing the Comedic Pedros that they're very autobiographical, in other words, from my life. So I thought, okay, let me go back to the beginning, the year of my birth, 1960, and go through the years, and I'll talk about funny things from my life and so forth, or in a funny way, at least. So, okay, so 1960, now let's see here. So in 1960, John F. Kennedy was elected President of the United States. And so I always felt kind of something, an affinity for him. He was this very handsome, young fella, very young. He's only 43, elected in 1960. The Democratic nominee, and he defeated Richard Nixon, the Republican nominee. Nixon later became president. Of course, the Kennedys are this glamorous family. He had all these siblings, and they had a lot of money, so they were like America's royal family. Since we didn't have a royal family, we broke away from the royal family of Great Britain. So the Kennedys, actually recently, though, I know one of the new generation of Kennedys is still in, they're still a power in the Democratic Party. Anyway, John F. Kennedy was elected, and actually in 1960, the most African countries became independent. It was the end of the colonial era. So I always felt something for Africa, interested in African countries. Quite a few countries. 1960 was the year that they became independent from Great Britain or France or one of those countries. Well, one of those two probably, because the Portuguese were later, and Germans were long gone. And Belgium, Congo, I think 1960. I always liked being born in 1960. I was born in May, and May's a nice month here. It's in spring, and I always liked 1960 because it was a nice round number. The beginning of a decade, the 1960s. It was easy for me to try to figure out my age. If I think of whatever the year it was, and do a little simple math. So anyway, I was born in May, and our family. I was the youngest of 4 children, and I was the last. There weren't any more after me. And then my first 6 months of my life, we stayed in the family home in Bay Village, 602 Huntmere Drive. I don't remember that. In fact, I don't remember really 1960. But as a family historian, I can, I have some ideas about what was going on. And so we moved in November, I believe, to what became the family home on Beechcliff Boulevard, which was the family home that I remember, where we stayed for the next 13 years. And so anyway, they said they brought me home from the hospital, my older sister Pamela, they asked if it's a boy or a girl, and they said, my mom said, it's a boy, we have a boy, and my sister Pamela said, did you check? You can't tell by the hair, That was a story my mom used to always tell. My older brother Mark was happy to have a younger brother, because he'd had 2 younger sisters, 2 in a row, and then finally a brother, and of course there was the age gap, about 8 years gap, so he was kind of not that easy for me to play. I can't really play with the 8-year gap. So we moved in November, and it was a presidential. Actually, November was the election, and so by November of 1960, we were at Beechcliff Boulevard. Now, looking at that family, our family, my father was turned 36 years old in 1960, so I'm 58, so he was much younger than I am now. And he was an amazing man. If you've watched any of these Oberlin College Diaries, it's about him and his college years. My father was an amazing man, very strong spirit, and very outgoing, and he was a leader. He's amazing. He was a chemist, had a chemistry degree, and then then went to law school at night. Oh boy, working all day and going to school at night, plus a tough course. Law is nothing easy. It's not chopped liver. So anyway, he was a lawyer and did very well. Did very well financially. He's a real. He was organized. My father, and very determined and hardworking, day after day, patient and very responsible. Good guy. And he got involved in all these activities in Cleveland. He was involved in not only making a living, doing well at that, but he was involved in community service, all kinds of things, organizations that he joined, and he would become president of, like the Junior Chamber of Commerce and the Big Brothers in Cleveland and United World Federalists. So actually, after work, he would usually very often be off at these meetings, and because he was interested and he wanted to contribute to the community. Very good. And but then by the time I was born, and see, this was the actually American. It was an era of prosperity. The United States, after the Second World War, really became the global superpower. The Americans, there was economic growth, the late 1940s throughout the 50s, and the United States was becoming a wealthy country. And my father's generation, they were the ones that really, for the first time, really did very well financially compared to the previous generations. And my dad was a part of that. And it was also the baby boom generation, where there were families were having lots of kids, big families. My parents had friends. Two couples, they both had 10 kids. And my father there was this movie, Cheaper by the Dozen. My father he wanted a big family. And he could support them. He was making the money. And so they were planning to have a big family. But my mom, after 4 kids, she said, that's enough. She was tired. And she also told my father, she says, John, you need to come home after work. It's wonderful, all this community service that you did, but I need you here. I'm tired, and I need help with these kids. So, my father really pretty much stopped, really cut way down on those activities after I was born. And he did start coming home, because, he said, all right. And some of his friends, they're pretty disappointed, like, John, what happened to John, Because he was no longer going to these meetings and these organizations. And one of his friends called and said, oh, can John come out to play? Because partly, joking around, they were, that was, it was enjoyable, these activities. It was not just, service work. They would also socialize, and he had these friends. But anyway, he started coming home. Yeah, and he would rock me to sleep, from what I've been told. And my older brother Mark had a hard time as a young boy, because he'd see his dad wasn't home, and then all of a sudden he was home, but my dad was taking care of me. Anyway, so that was good. That my mom she needed help. So anyway, my father, a really good guy, and he bought this family home on Beechcliff Boulevard, and it's not far from where I am living now. I'm in Rocky River, and sometimes I like to pass by. I've never been back inside. I always wanted to, but I don't know, I just didn't. If I ever pass by and I see somebody outside, I might ask them, tell them. It's been such a long time now. We moved out in 1973. Excuse me. And that was this brick house. I look at that house, and I think of our family. I think we were a noble family. And I look at that house. It's actually across the street from a row of houses that are on Lake Erie. And it's kind of exposed to the elements, because there's the park near Rocky River Park. It seems kind of vulnerable as I look at it. And I think of our noble, vulnerable family. Of course, we're all vulnerable in life, aren't we? Because who knows what things happen in life. Hardships come. But it was a real nice house, and I enjoyed it. And I was, there's a basement, and the first floor had a living room and a dining room and a little breakfast room where we usually would eat dinner or eat meals. The dining room was just for formal dinners. There was a fireplace, and upstairs there was a bathroom. There's only one shower bathing. It was like a bathroom with a bathtub and a shower just in that one bathroom. And then my parents had their room, and actually, there was the baby room that I was in, which is next to my parents' room. So I was, my mom had me in there in this crib, and if she could hear me if I was crying in the night, she'd come over. She breastfed me, I believe, for a nice amount of time. And Pam and Patty had a room, and then Mark was upstairs on the third floor. Eventually, I joined Mark when I got a little bit older, and then Pam took what had been the baby room. So anyway, so that was our family. Yeah, we're 1960. Now, okay, so that was about my father. Now, my mother, she also turned 36 in 1960. Yeah, and she had depression. My mother had depression. She it's not really something to joke about, but she apparently, yeah, and she was tired. She was one of these people, go, do a lot of stuff, but she would become depressed. And I think actually, this what they call postpartum depression, which does affect women after they give birth, because it's such an ordeal, pregnancy and the birth itself, and the responsibility of taking care of this child. And of course, right after birth, the women are so tired. That's why they take the babies away to a nursery so they can, because the mothers need to rest after giving birth. So anyway, my mom had depression. Apparently, she was real depressed while she was pregnant with me in the first year of my life. She had it on and off. She had depression. I know my dad told us there was a story. My dad came home from work once. She was crying, and but she fought it. She fought her depression, and she was what she did was activity. Try to stay busy, and that it helped her a lot. Although it still wasn't a permanent solution because she didn't really have access to something, a strong spirituality. Although actually they went to church. She was she went to church, she prayed, and church was very important to my mother. We'd always go to church on Sundays. And she always was prayer was a big thing for her. But I think ultimately that it was the Episcopal Church. They went in Bay Village, St. Barnabas, then we changed to St. Peter's in Lakewood. But ultimately, I think that wasn't a very, compared to some of the stuff coming out of India, which is extremely powerful spiritually, it wasn't as strong as that. But anyway, that was her life, and she did very well. And we lived near Rocky River Park, just across the street. And it was good for all of us, to go over there, because it's just near. You could walk over this park, real nice park, pretty big, and it was on Lake Erie. So that was a story of my mother in 1936. Now my older brother Mark, he turned 8, and he had a kind of a hard time. We moved from Bay Village to Rocky River, and he left his friends. And the street we lived on in Huntmere had a lot of kids. It was and not much traffic. So it was a real nice neighborhood. I think he really enjoyed that as a little boy. And he was by this time he was 8 years old, so he would have been in 3rd grade in elementary school. And he had to transfer schools to Rocky River to Kensington, which was very near, which was in a way was nice. You could walk to school. Just down as you left our house, you go take a right on the sidewalk. It would go sloping downward and then up on Morewood Parkway. Real kind of a pretty walk up to Avalon Drive and left in just a few minutes to the elementary school, Kensington, where we all went. Anyway, Mark had a hard time because he missed all his friends. And actually, that neighborhood was, the new neighborhood we moved in was kind of wealthy. Definitely more wealthy than the previous one. So older people, maybe whose kids had grown. And so he was kind of lonely early on, didn't have friends, although he eventually met this boy, Jeff A. Premium. So he was all happy to have a friend who lived behind us. And there was the Gregorys, who lived down the street by the park. Mark had a tough time early on. When we were in high school, the Rocky River sporting rival was Bay Village, and they'd have the chanting, "Go River, Bomb Bay." And Mark said he always felt a little affinity for Bay Village because that's where he had spent his first 8 years of life. Also, the home of George Steinbrenner, the former owner of the New York Yankees, whose family still owned the Yankees. My father knew, actually, and we have some Christmas cards from him. I sent him a Cleveland City of Champions T-shirt, and he sent me a letter. I got it here on the wall here, so it's right there on the wall. And Otto Graham, tremendous quarterback for the Browns, he lived in Bay Village as well. So anyway, my brother Mark, so he was in 3rd grade, going to school, and like I said, had kind of a difficult adjustment to this move. Later, we moved another time, and I had the same thing, although I was a little bit older. Now, my older sister Pamela, she turned 6. And so I believe she was in 1st grade, if I'm not mistaken. And I think she maybe didn't have as much trouble as Mark, as far as I know. But again, was walking to school. It's a real nice walk to school. Pam, my older sister, she was only 6, so I didn't know her at that time, but she was a strong person. They were kind of, Mark and Pam were, I would say, rivals, sibling rivalry, sort of competing like kids do for the parents' affection and approval, and in terms of achievement in school. So, and Pam, they're both, Mark and Pam were always very good students. In fact, our family, we were all top students, and we all played musical instruments. That was expected of us. Mark played the violin, Pam the cello, Patricia the viola, and I played the trombone. So anyway, Pam, she was my older sister. She was first grade. I think she didn't have as much of trouble with the move as my brother Mark did, because he was a little bit older and had his friends. Now the other sister I had was other older sister, although younger than Pam, was Patricia. And Patricia turned 3 in 1960. And I think she kind of had a hard time with my birth because she had been the baby of the family. And I think that's natural. Sometimes I think about it, wonder if my mom had more kids. I don't like that thought, actually, of a younger child. I was always the youngest, so I got the most love. Yeah, and I'm sure there was some resentment among Mark, Pam, and Patricia, which is, I think, common in families because, everyone wants to be loved. And the baby of the family always gets the most because they're the youngest and maybe the so-called the cutest and most vulnerable and weakest and so forth. But anyway, Patty and I were, you could say, we were kind of like Mark and Pam were a kind of rivals and a pair, and Patty and I as well. Although, Patty, she was the younger sister of Pam, and I think Mark and Patty kind of had a friendship, partly because, Mark and Pam were rivals, and so Mark was affectionate with Patricia. And then, of course, I was, we were close in age, so, we kind of grew up together and did things together. And Patricia always she seemed to take the role of guiding me and even instilling some discipline, because she seemed to feel that I was being spoiled and wasn't getting enough discipline, which she may have been right. And of course, myself, as I said, the first 7 months of my life were spent in 1960, and I obviously don't remember anything. And eventually, I was in this crib. I do have a memory, probably not in that particular year, but lying on my back in this playpen, and there was they had what they had with little kids, called a mobile. It was something that would be hanging to give the little kid laying on his back, if he's awake, something to look at, so he wouldn't be too bored. And there were these little birds. I think they were kind of rubber. And I remember looking at these little birds just sitting there. They're hanging above my head. I think there was a blue jay and a cardinal and a robin, maybe a sparrow. Maybe those were the 4. I think there were 4. So I was in this room next to my parents' room. And like I said, my father was rocking me to sleep. So I was always, I was loved by my mother and father very much, and which is very important early on with children. And that's how it was with me. Sometimes the older kids have it tougher because they don't get as much love because they're often stricter. And since when you're the youngest, parents are older and maybe more mature and also a little bit more tired. So there can be a tendency to neglect younger children, but also less discipline, more love. So anyway, that was our family. That was a nice 1960. I look back on it, and John F. Kennedy was the new president, this young fella, and the new era, the 1960s, which there was the beginning of this race to go. John F. Kennedy said, we're going to go to the moon. That's so the space race, going to the moon, which was achieved in 1969. And the 1960s, which were started off, kind of conservative and traditional, and then really became crazy because they had the Vietnam War and all this. This is part of my early childhood. The Vietnam War became very, very troubling, and then the anti-war movement later on, and then the hippies and so forth. But anyway, 1960, I was born in a good family. I can say that. My mother and father were good people, and they were very hardworking and responsible, and they had good character, and they they cared about other people. They believed in service, which is very important. This should be an important thing in life, and maybe sometimes they did too much because they had these 4 kids. But anyway, I have to give them a lot of credit, and my mother credit for fighting depression through staying busy and getting things accomplished. And so it was nice. And I think back on that house. Yeah, I'd like to look at that. It was a Tudor house. It was brick. Had kind of this pointy thing, and then there was brick house, and not a very big yard, and the backyard was pretty small, and the driveway, And yeah, I like to, not much, like I said, very limited bathing facilities. On the third floor, there was just a sink and a toilet. And then there was actually a bathroom on the first floor, just a sink and a toilet. And the base, and actually nothing in, there was this basement as well, where we eventually put a television, like a recreation room. So that's the story of the 1960s, my first year, of 1960, the first 7 months of course, I was in my mother's womb the first 5 months of 1960. Yeah, she was pregnant with me. They said she was depressed, but she fought against that. So, then of course, after my birth, and outside the womb, you could say the first 7 months of my life from my birth on May 11th, which was, I think, is a nice month to be born. It's nice, because here in Cleveland we have tough winters. So that's the story of 1960, Comedic Pedro, 1960. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.